Welcome. It's Mike Griffith here. Tuesday night, Ingles on the Beat night. Going to talk a little Georgia football with you. Hope everybody's having a great Tuesday. Had a great weekend, and we had a busy weekend. We've had a busy day at Dog Nation. Some good stories up. Don't know if you've been to the page, but some good stuff there. Before we get started, I want to tell you, Ingles still, I believe, doing those hirings. Interviews being held on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. If you're interested in the job, part-time, long-term, short-term, go to the Ingles website and click under the careers tab. You can check that out. All Ingles location open 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. The first hour open for those older senior shoppers and those with compromised immune systems. Hope everyone taking good care of yourself first and foremost. That social distancing, these 2 weeks, these are pivotal. PSA, public service announcement there. And, it's hard to keep this all into perspective, but you know what? Football season could be just around the corner. At least Mike Gundy thinks that. We've heard Brian Kelly say that he thought that the football players need to be practicing by July 1st for the season to get off on time. Well, today, Mike Gundy, he of the I'm a man, I'm 40 rant, had a rant today that I believe was pretty controversial. We're hearing some people taken aback that Gundy is pushing this hard. It certainly is an extreme. We haven't heard any coach this forceful with his comments. I'm going to read you some things that Mike Gundy, the Oklahoma State coach, said today. So he says, I'm thinking in 3 to 4 weeks we can have the test ready and available for people that aren't sick based on can we test the employees, the 100 people that work in our building? Can we swab them and clear them to come into the building and get back to work? Okay, that sounds pretty reasonable. But then Gundy goes on. He says the NCAA presidents and universities, the conference commissioners, athletic directors, they all need to be meeting right now and start coming up with answers, okay? In my opinion, we have to bring our players back, test them. They're in good shape. They're all 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. They're healthy. A lot of them can fight it off with their natural body, their antibodies, and the buildup they have. And there's some people that are asymptomatic. If that's true, then yes, sequester them. And people say that's crazy. No, that's not crazy, because we need to continue the budget and run money through the state of Oklahoma. So I'm like with Gundy, we need to have people getting together and making decisions. And I go, yeah. And they're all young and they're healthy and we need to test them all. And I go, yeah. And then he says, and we need to do it because we need the money. And I go, no. Draw the line there, Gundy. Not the way to present the argument. Don't want to put student athletes in harm's way. Now, I do believe that you can play football in a controlled environment without the fans. And I know I've heard some ADs say, well, I know the Notre Dame athletic director came out today and said, well, we really don't want to do that. I know North Carolina coach Matt Brown said, well, we really don't want to do that. And that's where I go, listen, if there's not a season, do they get paid? I mean, do the coaches still get paid if there's not a season? Do the ADs still get paid? What happens if there's not a season? So I'm not about compromising anybody's health, but I am about looking for solutions. And if part of the solution is that we have to start the season without fans in attendance, you play the games on television, you make sure the student athletes are tested. If you don't have the tests in place, then you can't do it, right? But if you can test the student athletes and you can declare these people are healthy enough for the contact, then you do it. And you might say to yourself, hey, that's taking a chance. Well, I'm not saying take a chance. I'm saying let's get the technology in place to test the student athletes. So you've got, 60 players on each team. Maybe the home team suits up, whatever. All those guys get tested. And they play football with officials that have been tested. And it's like the personnel, it was what was going to happen in Nashville. Now, the reason you can't have fans is because you can't possibly test 80 or 90,000 fans. That's just not cost efficient. But if you play the game without the fans, you can still have it on television. And you're pretty much trying to buy the time and hope that by the end of the year, there's this vaccine. And before anybody says how long it's going to take, I'm just going to tell you this is unprecedented times. I have a lot of confidence in our scientists and our medical and our doctors. I think, the United States, I think we're the greatest country in the world. I'm all in on that. and I'm not going to sell those people short, and I'm not going to say that we should cancel the season any sooner than we should have to. And the fact that, Kirby Smart was on a teleconference last week talking about, some of these same things about taking temperatures and players, sequestering players that are ill and things like that tells you that these discussions are happening. So Mike Gundy may seem frustrated that people out there in Oklahoma aren't talking about it. I can almost guarantee you it's being talked about in the Southeastern Conference. I can guarantee you the Georgia players that I'm familiar with are all preparing as though they know they've got to come back and get ready for a football season at some point. When, I don't know. There are a lot of questions about this. One of the questions involves, making sure you've got all the athletic directors and all the school presidents on the same page. Let's just say the SEC's all in, but the ACC's not all in. Let's say the Boston College president says, we're not doing it. That creates a problem with scheduling. So, you wonder if you can get everyone on the same page. That's part of the issue. Even if you've got 95% of people, if you've got these two holdout schools, what if Notre Dame says we're not doing it, right? Then what happens? So there's a lot to get done. I think Gundy's spirit is right. I think his mind is in the right place as far as people need to start hammering this out right now.
You'll be joining
but at the same time, I think that you do need to go into this with some caution. You need to go into this with some trepidation, aware that it's still a possibility. Okay. There may not be a season, but you've got to work as though there will be a season.
Some chats. Are you ready to go now?
Prepare for the best case. What did we say? Expect the best and be prepared for the worst case scenario. I think you've got to go in working both those operatives. Here's another question. What if the Power 5 schools are all in and some of the other people aren't all in on this? There's a lot of different opinions out there. I want to bring in Cole Kubelik. He's a friend of mine. He works for ESPN. He does a lot of sideline work for some of the SEC network and the ESPN games. Cole also worked with the XFL before that season was shortened up. So I'll just wait for my producer to let me know when we've got Cole, and I'll bring him into this discussion as well and see what he has to say. Cole, I understand you're with us now. What are some of your thoughts on the comments from Mike Gundy today and when the football season might start in your mind? What are some scenarios?
Yeah, I think Coach Gundy is just kind of speaking from the heart. I think we're all a little bit frustrated. I think we all have, different motivation and are thinking different things right now. It's to me, a lot of this feels extremely rushed. A lot of, whether you're talking about the NBA, you're talking about Major League Baseball, whether you're talking about college football or the NFL, there are a lot of entities that seemingly are coming up with ideas or kicking ideas around that just feel extremely rushed based on everything that we're dealing with right now. Is it okay to maybe sacrifice the following season or put at risk players or put at risk people who are going to be around players just to get a season going? And I understand there's a lot of people, Mike, that are going to sit there and say, I just want sports. I'll watch minor league baseball players play. I don't care what college football teams it is. That's all of us right now. But that doesn't mean that you rush it to the table and you push all your chips in just to try to get a quarter of a season or a half a season or 3/4 of a season in, not knowing what the tail end of that's going to look like. So it's, to me right now, it's a day-to-day situation. It's fluid. You wait, you see, you continue to review data each and every day. You continue to see where we are as a country each and every day, and you make those decisions based on the information that you have and the experts that you have around you. I think Mike Gundy is probably trying to look out for a lot of different people and probably trying to help a lot of different people. Were some of his comments taken out of context? Probably, but it felt like the tone of it felt like he was willing to put his players at risk just to try to get a season going. And I don't think any of us would believe that that's fair.
Yeah, I think the key word you used there, Cole, is fluid. Every day it seems like there's different people, different opinions. And I'm good with opinions. Kirk Herbstreit came out earlier, said he'd be shocked. Some people were upset by that. But, hey, Kirk gets paid to give opinions. And I think part of the reason people were upset is that he's right a lot of the time. And, the fact of the matter is the season is threatened. And to your point, I don't think anybody wants to see these student athletes put at risk. My provisions would be, if you can test them, if you can do it safely, I would be good. And I'm interested to hear what I would be good with games being played without the fans at the start of the season. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, we talked about the comments from Jack Swarbrick on 3 Man Front on WJOX, which you appear on every Monday with us in Birmingham. And I'm fine not having fans if that's what's best for the fans, and it's still safe for the players to do it. I understand that college football is a little bit different, and it's supposed to involve the students. It's supposed to be a part of school. It's supposed to be a tradition that involves academics. That's why they're called student athletes. But I think there's obviously an importance that football brings to the table. And we can sit here, Mike, and we can say, oh, it's greed and everybody just wants their money. And these ADs are Scrooge McDuck trying to dive into their swimming pools of cash and gold bullion. But in the reality, how many athletic programs are going to go away if there is no football? It's not just about football players. And to me, there's a giant misconception with a large portion of the general public. That is that these ADs and presidents and everybody involved with collegiate athletics are walking around campuses with $100 bills falling out of their pockets and making it rain everywhere they go on campus because they don't know what to do with their cash, and they're wiping their rear ends with $100 bills. And it's just not the case. Outside of 10, 15, 20 athletic departments, most of these are piecing it together check to check. When you hear paycheck game for a lot of these teams, that's a very real thing. They don't say that just because you get a lot of money to do it. A lot of these schools are going to play Georgia, and that's a weight room. A lot of these schools are going to play Alabama, and that's how they travel the next year, or that's how other sports travel, or that's how they get uniforms. There are a lot of things that go into this other than just, hey, these academic advisors and these presidents and ADs are greedy and want as much cash as humanly possible. It's a little bit deeper than that. And I think that's where Coach Gundy was kind of trying to go, in that there's a lot of people that rely on college football. We need to get this thing going to try to help them out. Was the way that he said it a little bit irresponsible? Was it somewhat tone deaf? Yes, it was. People are going to take it out of context. And listen, Mike Gundy's going to tell you whatever he feels. And he's going to tell you exactly what he's thinking and exactly what's on his mind. He's not going to hold back. He's proven that time and time again. So I think I have an idea of where he was trying to go. I just don't think he did a great job of getting us there. And I think there's also a lot of people, based on some things that he said and some things that he's done, that are just kind of waiting to pounce. He's sort of low-hanging fruit to a certain extent, in that people want to attack Mike Gundy. So I'm willing to give him a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt than a lot of other people are. But when it comes to playing games with fans, if it was safe for the players, if you could guarantee their health, and not just them, but the people around them, and then where do you draw that line? Are family and friends allowed to go? From a medical staff perception, security, where do you draw the line as to only this many people are going to be allowed to be involved? How many boosters are going to be coming up to them saying, no, I'm going to beat that game. That academic center's got my name on it. We're going to be in our suite. That's right. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. So I think it becomes very blurry if you say no fans in attendance, where you draw the line as far as what human beings are actually going to be able to be there to watch that game.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I somehow I can see an empty stadium, but the suites will be full with the donors, just as they're the ones that are allowed to drink alcohol in some places, such as Georgia. Other stadiums now moved alcohol. But the point is, you're right. There's going to be some haves. There's going to be some have-nots. There would have to be a lot of I's dotted and T's crossed. But, Cole, when we're talking about, and to your point, when we're talking about each school getting $44 million as a part of the television package from the Southeastern Conference rewards, that's a lot of money to jump through a lot of hoops. And, it was Roy Kramer, the great Roy Kramer, the commissioner, when you played. And for those who don't recognize your name or realize that you're a former Auburn Tiger from 96 to 01, a center with Auburn. And, of course, you and I go back to your radio show in Huntsville long ago, before you were the big star on ESPN, right? But Roy Kramer said football is the engine that drives the revenue train. This game I'm looking at, Louisiana Monroe, East Tennessee State, they need this Georgia game, as you said, to pay for women's basketball, to pay for the tennis team, to pay for the marching band's uniforms. I look at Georgia's budget. I had a story today. $70 million of Georgia's $153 million annual budget comes strictly from tickets and ticket licenses. That's $70 million. Plug in another $44 for that television contract. 44 and 7. Let me do my math there. 104. That's $114,000 out of 153. Roughly 70% of Georgia's money comes from football, and that's not even counting the donations, which we all know are driven heavily towards the football program. So it means a lot in terms of the financials of it. I think it means a lot to the players. This isn't like, I don't think, track or even baseball to some extent. When I look at the Georgia roster, Cole, guys like Richard LeCounte, if there's no season, they're not coming back. They're going to the NFL draft. You lose a complete class, even if you say we'll give you an extra year. And you were a former player. You could probably speak to that.
Well, if I was in Richard LeCounte's situation where I knew I was going to be drafted, yeah, that's a different discussion. For me, I probably would have taken the extra year just because I didn't think I was going to have a very bright NFL future. But I think you even take that into consideration when you begin to talk about moving the season back. I talked to Brett McMurphy the other day, and he said that there are some people involved with collegiate athletics that have mentioned starting the season in the spring. Can you imagine a college football weekend the same day as the NFL draft? We've sort of reviewed that horror story a few times with collegiate baseball where guys are literally running in from the outfield between innings and their teammates are telling them that they just got drafted. I would assume, and that would be crazy enough. What happens the 2 or 3 weeks left in the regular season after said player is drafted? And he knows he just went in the first round and is guaranteed $18.2 million, $26 million, even $10.5, $4 million guaranteed money to just sign and make sure he shows up in camp when it starts later that year. So that's where I go back to what I said earlier in that I'm surprised to hear a lot of these discussions about we could move it to here, we could start it here, it could go here. But in all of those discussions, never have I heard anyone hear anything about the following season and how that would be impacted. And to me, that's irresponsible to have a discussion about we're going to do this and this and this for 2020 and not have a discussion about how it impacts 2021 is egregious in my mind. Because whatever you do this year, like you said, there are guys that can walk away and be fine and maybe not play again. But there's also incoming freshmen and current freshmen and sophomores and redshirt freshmen and juniors that might need to come back and play another year or finish school or just want to be in college for another year. So there are a lot of other guys that are impacted by that if you're not taking that into consideration. I agree with you. Football drives everything, and football is going to be what brings in the majority of the eyeballs, the majority of the revenue. And I understand the aspect of it needs. Yes, by any means necessary, you try to get this season in. But that's why I say you just wait and you take it day by day. It's a fluid situation. I'm surprised certain leagues like the PGA has come back and said, we are going to start in June and be here. We don't know what's going to be happening in June. We don't know what's going to happen in September, October. We don't know what's going to happen at the end of April. So it's these definitive measures of we will do this, we will do that, we're targeting this. To me, it's fine to say, hey, this is what we're thinking, but obviously we have no idea how things are going to look tomorrow, next week, next month, much less 3 to 6 months ahead of now.
Right. I guess you got to have the contingency plan in place should all things work out. And again, I'm a confident guy. I try to think positive. I know that thinking positive doesn't make magic happen, but I think you've got to be prepared in the event that we do find a cure, that we do find a way to analyze and have these student athletes ready. Let's lighten it up a little bit, Cole. Being a former SEC player, your opinions, your insights, I think they're invaluable. The reason why I always enjoyed going on your show in Huntsville and why I still go on 3-Man Front in Birmingham on WJOX. Every day it's a great show with you and Aaron Suttles and Landrum Roberts. We have a lot of fun with that show. Certainly the work you do on the sidelines. I was really enjoying the XFL work. I think you've made a mark with your ability and your willingness to analyze line play. It's almost as if the big uglies have been ignored forever, but now they've got one of their own. They've got their own big ugly on the sideline doing the analysis. Were you surprised how you were able to grow into that niche? And what has that been like for you to see all the feedback you get on Twitter when you do those breakdowns on linemen and on the sidelines when you talk about those players?
Oh, Mike, I love people telling me how dumb I am every day and how worthless I am every day and how I don't know anything and how terrible I was as a player and how terrible I am as a human. Are you kidding? It's the favorite part of my day to open that app up and see and hear all the negativity. You know exactly what that's all about because every time you appear on our show, I see it on our show's feed. But I don't know if I ever anticipated the offensive line portion being a big part of me being able to move up the ladder a little bit. And listen, as far as I'm concerned, I still got a long way to go. I've barely stepped on the first rung. So I don't sit back and have any conversations with myself like I've made it or anything like that. But it has been cool to see the offensive line get a little bit more publicity, have a little bit more discussion. And guys like Jeff Schwartz and Aaron Taylor and Eric Wood that works for the ACC network and Matt Stinchcomb, obviously a former Bulldog with the SEC network. There have been more and more guys who have been involved and maybe now get a little bit more notoriety or people actually listen to what they want to say when you talk about how an offensive line play works and how a center blocks back and a guard pulls around and why a protection broke down. As where, I mean, my least favorite thing that I hear color commentators say is, when they're referencing a quarterback, look at him buying time in the pocket. Oh, he's just buying time back there in the pocket. I'm like, he ain't buying anything. There's guys up there that are doing that for him. So things like that mindset, we're continuing to just try to move that thing along. Guys like Mike Golick Jr. with ESPN, all of us that play the position, we're just trying to educate, help people understand that there's another portion of football. Like you said, you kind of laugh about it, but it's also somewhat fair. It feels like it's been ignored for a very long time. I had someone present me with a greatest players in the SEC by decade of the last 4 decades, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. The first offensive lineman that showed up was Matt Stinchcomb in the late 90s. And I'm sitting there thinking, did we just start playing offensive line when Matt Stinchcomb got to Georgia? Like, nothing against Stinch. He's a Hall of Famer. He deserves to be on that list. But there are some pretty good guys that did it before he did it and since he's done it. So it's just people can't – there's no qualifying statistic that people can go look up online, and you can listen to PFF and all these made-up algorithms and analogies and stats that they come up with every other time about block ratio and whiff percentage and whatever else they come up with. They do some really good things, but they do some things that don't make a lot of sense. It's still the only position that can truly has to be evaluated by the film. A lot of other positions, you can go look at what guys have done statistically, where they did it, who they did it against, how they did it. You can't do that with offensive line play to this day. And that's why it makes it very difficult for people to evaluate and have a really strong opinion on.
Yep. We're talking with Colt Cubic. He's a former offensive lineman at Auburn. He's on WJOX's 3-man front. Also, SEC Network and ESPN sideline analyst. He's done XFL work. You see him in a lot of the SEC games. I've known Cole for a long time. Really enjoy our friendship, Cole, and appreciate you coming on here with me tonight. The Georgia fans, and I know we talked at the beginning of our interview about if there will be, if there won't be, but go along with me on this is projecting a season. There's a lot of excitement about Matt Luke, what Georgia was able to do in the Sugar Bowl with 3 starting offensive linemen essentially out. And they were able to go out there and play pretty good football with some young guys. Is it too much to ask Matt Luke to just step into Sam Pittman's shoes and suddenly there's no Andrew Thomas, there's no Isaiah Wilson, there's no Solomon Kinley, there's no Cade Mays, the guy that you were really high on, and ask the Georgia offensive line not to drop off that much? Or can he get a group of these guys ready? And how much is missing spring hurting this offensive line continuity?
Missing spring hurts every offensive line. And you and I have had similar conversations like this. And if we are sort of playing along and we're going to say that we have a season this year, I think we're embarking on the least physical college football season that we've ever seen, ever in the history of the game. Because and Matt Stinchcomb and I had this conversation a lot. People just like to say, oh, spread offense, oh, up-tempo offense. And that's the reason that offensive lines aren't good. Well, go watch Greg Robinson when he was at Auburn, and they were going fast, and they were running a spread offense, and he was dominant. Go watch Greg Little when he was at Ole Miss. He was dominant. They were throwing the ball 55 times a game, but he was still punching people's lights out. So that to me is not the main reason that offensive line play has been regressing. It's the amount of physical practices that have been taken away. It's the only position that you truly have to be in full pads, have to be going full speed against someone who's trying to make you look bad to truly be great and to truly hone your craft. So when I look at a lot of these offensive linemen and offensive lines, the first quarter of the season is almost turned into extended practice or another acclimation period, not just getting used to playing college football, but getting used to playing to the guy next to you and being used to playing the physical nature and the way that the game's supposed to be played. Some guys, even that have done it the year or two before, it takes a little bit of time to get back into that rhythm. When you have single-digit padded practices in the fall and maybe 8, 9, 10 padded practices in the spring, which I don't even think many go that high, you're taking away the fundamental part of what it takes to be great at that position. The further we get away from that, the longer it's going to take for those guys to be ready once the season begins. And honestly, like I said, I don't think they've been ready when the season began. I mean, go look at that Georgia offensive line early last year to late last year. It's a totally different group. You know, go look at Alabama's offensive line early last year towards the end of last year. Kentucky's group, same difference. LSU's group was not very good early. They win the Joe Moore Award because they learned how to be dominant later in the year, even having to interchange some parts throughout the course of the way. So as far as him coming in and being a great offensive line coach, I have all the confidence that he can do that. He was still coaching it part-time when he was the head coach at Ole Miss. He played the position in this league. He obviously coached the position in this league. He knows what it takes to be great at that position in this league. And he's a guy that his players absolutely love, very similar to Sam Pittman. They actually have similar demeanor, in my opinion, the way that they coach. You know, they're not in your face, finger pointing, spitting on you. They're not the MFer type of coach that you see sometimes that like to coach that position. So I think that they'll be able to help that group gel a little bit more. But it's not just not having spring ball. It's not being around those guys. It's not being in the facility with those guys. That's going to hurt because this is the part of the year where you can build a lot of continuity. Mike, those guys are allowed to go out in the summer now and essentially hold their own practice. They can go out there on the field. If you go to any SEC team in the summer, it used to be where I'd go snap the ball, center quarterback, couple receivers, couple DBs, and that was it. The whole team's going out there now. And that's 4 or 5 days a week in the summer. That's not just Georgia. That's not just Auburn. That's not just Bama. They're all doing it because they know they have to do it to get better. So knowing about the guy next to you, expecting different things from the guys lined up next to you, knowing their tendencies by sitting in film with them, that's going to be very difficult. And I think it's going to make that acclimation period of whenever this season does begin that much longer. And when they do get in and they have a chance to hit and be physical, how many of these coaches, and I don't really anticipate Kirby being one of these guys, but he has to have some hesitancy once it begins. How many of these coaches are going to sit back and say, we can't afford to hit. We can't afford to go full speed. Because if I lose this guy or that guy, we're done. We got to take our chances once we get in the games. And then once you get in the games, if you're playing Tennessee Martin, if you're playing Citadel, if you're playing Tulane, do you go out there and let those guys go 4 quarters? Because we got to get them acclimated. We got to get these guys ready to play. So it is going to be the most interesting case of people management that maybe we've ever seen in sports. And that probably doesn't just go for college football. That probably goes for the NFL, depending on when it goes, if the NBA comes back, however the Major League Baseball handles their situation. All of these sports, how they handle physicality. I mean, we've already seen in the NBA with this time management deal that they're going through, and half these guys won't even play back-to-back games anymore, much less play 40 minutes in a full game. So I think it's going to be one of the most interesting case studies in people management and athlete management as far as their bodies, their minds, and the physicality is concerned that we've ever seen, because there is no blueprint. There is no blueprint to follow. There is no situation in which this has happened in a very similar way that these guys can go attack this with. So I think they'll handle it with kid gloves, and I think you'll probably see the football pay for it. I think blocking and tackling will be down. I think execution offensively will be down, and it'll take some teams 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks to really start to get a rhythm going.
No doubt. Big advantage for the defense, I would say, especially a defense like Georgia brings back 9 of those 11 starters.
I'm going after everybody. I'm Todd Grantham times 10 if I'm a D coordinator in this league next year. Because I don't think my quarterbacks and receivers are on the same page. Right. I don't think my O-line's on the same page. I don't think they're physically ready to do it. I don't know if they're going to be able to survive big hits. I am teeing off every play if I'm a defensive coordinator in this league this year.
And conversely, on offense, you're keeping it simple. Not going to be a lot, and if you're Georgia, you're bringing in a new coordinator, a new quarterback, and I've told people, there's not going to be a big playbook. If the season goes on, there'll be a lot of different looks, a lot of different motions, a lot of different shifts, a lot of window dressing, Cole, but probably only 7 or 8 base plays because it is going to be, as you said, so doggone hard to execute without that time to get that offensive line choreography, without that time for the quarterback to get in sync with his receivers. And all Georgia fans got to do is take a look at Jake Fromm and some of those receivers last year when Kirby Smart said they had the merry-go-round of receivers, and Jake Fromm went from a guy throwing 70% completion with Lawrence Cager out there to a guy under 50% when he didn't have a competent receiver on the same page. So that was kind of a preview, I think. And then here comes Jamie Newman. And I guess I'll ask you about him, Cole. You brought up the Pro Football Focus numbers, the analytics. Newman ranks very high in those numbers. Obviously, the last 5 games of the season, he was missing 2 out of his top 3 receivers. They didn't have any games where they threw it over 30 passes. But up until that point, he was quarterback 2 or 3 behind Burrow, Fields, of the returning quarterbacks, deep windows or tight window throws, deep throws. Are we looking for too much, or could there really be a guy that comes in at 6'4", 230 out of Wake Forest and steps in as the best quarterback in the league, as these PFF numbers are suggesting to us?
I think best quarterback in the league is probably expecting a little bit too much right now because I anticipate Kellen Mond's going to have a big year at A&M. He's got legitimate weapons back. He's got an offensive line that has spent a lot of time together, and he's been in that offense enough now where Jimbo Fisher, I think the last few years where he's tried to attach everything to everything, may sort of dial things back a little bit. If he has more of a running game with a really good group of tight ends, that Kellen may actually be able to be more successful in that offense. I think Kyle Trask is set to have a good year at Florida with the weapons he has around him and a great understanding of that offense. And Dan does as good a job managing what he has and calling his offense to what he has, as opposed to trying to force feed different things. But I'm very interested to see how Coach Monken handles this offense and exactly what it looks like. I agree with you from the simplicity standpoint. And the good news is with a lot of things in today's college football, offensively, you can be simple but make it look very difficult.
That's right.
You can have one play called now that has 4 or 5 different attachments to it. I mean, you can have a play where the quarterback is literally reading the running back and has the option to run, or he can pull and has an RPO that he can throw, or maybe hit a quick screen out. I mean, there's a lot of these offenses, if you watch them now, Mike, I mean, they're legitimately faking a run to the right. There's a screen that they can throw to the left that the offensive line is going to block on, but you can watch the quarterback and his eyes are reading an RPO route, and he has the option to pull the ball and run it. I mean, you're talking about 4 to 6 different things to defend. Coordinators can give you that with a word and a number, like Omaha 67, and that's it. And you can run all those things. And what Jamie Newman brings is a quarterback that has an understanding of that. He's been in a read offense. If you watch Wake Forest play, he has the little baby walk. You walk the dog zone read where he'll creep to the line of scrimmage, then he'll take off, or he'll pull it up and throw it. The intermediate accuracy worries me just a little bit. Ball tempo, ball velocity is not one of his strengths right now, but he's got a big arm. He's pretty accurate in most of his throws. And like you said, he's big and physical, so that gives you some durability, which I think is going to be key in this league based on everything that we talked about with offensive line play and the amount of time that these guys are going to actually spend on the field before the season begins.
And to your point, we talked about the importance of depth as we said that this was going to be the least physical. I would say that would probably accompany the most injuries if we were talking about the amount of preparation. As you said, very aggressive defenses coming at you. And Georgia now could be 3 deep. We're waiting to hear about Juan Mathis in May, Cole. It's amazing. The guy had brain surgery last May to have his cyst removed, and he's 1 clearance away, 1 MRI away in May from being cleared to play. Got a special Kevlar helmet. We'll see that trotted out. That's going to be real interesting. They have Carson Beck. He's another guy, not quite like Jamie Newman. He's only a freshman, but a big kid out of Florida with a big arm, very athletic. So I think Kirby feels confident with this RPO style of offense. You know, the big difference, and I'll ask you to weigh in because I just don't think Georgia fans really get it. When I say it, they say, oh, Mike, you covered Jake. But, the beauty of Jake Fromm was, we were talking about how fluid this situation was with RPOs and 4 different things that could happen. Jake Fromm was the guy, the human microchip that could process the 4 different things before the play even starts. based on the defensive alignments, based on the matchups that he gets, based on the protections that he can call, based on his film study. He goes through those four things in his mind and gets you in the best play 85% of the time without looking to the sideline. Cole, I'll let you speak to that. Not a lot of guys could do what Jake Fromm was able to do for Georgia last year.
His recognition at the line of scrimmage and ability to read and change and morph and alter, it's not something that you see very often in college football. And his leadership on top of that, I think, is something that will be greatly missed. Was he mismanaged a little bit at times last year? Maybe. I think there were times in which that offense tried to be something that really no offense in today's college football can be and truly be successful, because teams are just going to score no matter how good your defense is. I mean, what do we hear going to that national championship game? Number one scoring defense in the nation. Number one scoring defense in the nation. Number one scoring defense in the nation. It took LSU 4 or 5 series, and then what happened? They started scoring a lot of points.
Right.
So you can only shut offenses down for so long in today's college football. You better be explosive and you better be able to score. Now, if you want to throttle that back, that's another conversation at times, but you better be able to find ways to score in certain spots or you're flat out going to get beat. I think if you trade some of those things at the line of scrimmage for the athleticism, the durability, the mobility, and maybe the big arm down the field, which Jamie Newman does have, that's not necessarily a completely that's not a trade that a lot of people would bark at. I think there are a lot of offensive coordinators that would say, hey, being able to do that's really cool, but I'd rather have a guy that can get me out of a jam and that can take a hit and can throw the deep ball and can be explosive in 3, 4, 5 different ways. So Jake was a great college football player. I think Jake's going to be a good pro. I think he'll be on an NFL roster for a long time. But sitting down, meeting with him, talking to him, talking offense with him, talking recognition and keys and defense with him, that's when, and I was fortunate enough to be able to do that a few times, that's when you get a true feel of just what he is. Talking to his offensive coordinators about what he can handle, the confidence that they have in him in those situations, that tells you how valuable he was. So I wonder if that's going to hurt his appreciation down the road. I hope it doesn't. But, man, that's what we do as college football fans anyway. It's on to the next. I mean,
it's unbelievable.
How many times have you covered a kid that was the greatest to ever do it at that position? I remember Julio Jones at Alabama, and all I heard about was, oh, this next kid. Wait till you see this next kid. It was Mari Cooper, so he was pretty good too. But wait till you see this next kid. It was Calvin Ridley, so he was pretty good too. But, I mean, it's just all school. Wait till you see this next guy. Wait till you see this next guy. So that's college football fans. It's what we love to do. We love to see who's going to be next. And unfortunately, we like to crown a lot of guys before they need to be crowned.
Yeah, it happens. And Jake, the point guard, the manager, only as good as the supporting cast. He was a better quarterback, far better quarterback his junior year, but there wasn't Sony Michel, and there wasn't Nick Chubb, and there wasn't Terry Godwin and Riley Ridley and Wims on the outside. Suddenly there were these receivers with no experience and only one running back, and really DeAndre Swift, one game breaker back there. The downfield blocking wasn't as good. So I kind of felt like Jake fell victim to not having the same supporting cast that he'd had the 2 prior years. And that's the danger with the drop back quarterback, right? It is a dependent position. And it'll be interesting to me. Like, I want to see Cole, and you talk Alabama every day. You're kind of forced to. Cole, your position, a former Auburn player doing radio in Alabama. I mean, holy cow. I mean, every day I say a prayer for you because those Crimson Tide fans are unbelievable. I covered both programs in the state. I know how that deal goes. But, I just can't believe that Nick Saban is happy. And I got some Twitter hate today, people saying, how about that, Griff? We got to remember who's on top there, boy. That would be LSU. And Alabama was actually the 4th highest ranked team in the SEC. So let's not forget that Alabama's not on top anymore. But I've got to believe, Cole, I cannot believe that Nick Saban is going to be happy with this up-tempo, fast speed. I mean, he played the game. He had Tua. I got to think Saban's going to go back the other way. When these coaches lose control, like Georgia fans are always amazed, like, man, they asked Kirby his favorite game, and he doesn't say it's the Oklahoma Rose Bowl. Heck no. Kirby Smart's a defensive coach. He wanted to pull his hair out that whole game. Your thoughts on where Alabama football could be headed now under Nick Saban with all these changes? Are all the changes that they're finally going to catch up with the Tide?
Well, I think it goes back to what you just said about a drop back quarterback being dependent. And I think what kind of offense you run should be dependent on the quarterback that you have. Unless you have Cam Newton ability and you have no NFL receivers on your team, yet you're still able to lead the SEC in rushing and put up 50 touchdowns in a season, you have to be dependent on other guys around you. Alabama was dependent on what Tua was able to do. Now, he had some gifted receivers, some unbelievable receivers, and some good backs and some good offensive linemen, but he was able to make that thing even more different than anybody else could have with that extra talent around him. Jalen Hurts had a lot of that talent around him early in his career, or later in his career, early in their career, and they weren't doing the kind of things that they were doing with Tua. I think it will be more dependent on who they have at quarterback that the offense has scaled back a little bit this year. They're going to be pretty good up front. Lester Cotton's back. Landon Dickerson's back. Alex Leatherwood is back on that offensive line. And they got some young guys that have been waiting to play. Darian Dalcourt's a center that looks really good, was a true freshman last year. He'll have a chance to step in and play. Pierce Quick's a guy that they have a lot of confidence in, may have a chance to step in and play. With that offensive line and that group of tailbacks, Najee Harris, Brian Robinson and company, and if it is Mac Jones at quarterback, and even if it's not and it's Bryce Young, I don't expect a true freshman to come in and just open it up and throw the ball 40, 45 times a game. I anticipate because of who they're going to have to be dependent upon that offense probably changes a little bit and probably scales back a little bit. And that will probably make Nick Saban happy as well. As far as what the team actually looks like, they may take a step back, but it's not going to be too far back. I don't have the weird thing about Alabama, and people talk about the offense and who's going to be quarterback, this, that. I have concerns about the defense. I don't know who their edge rusher is going to be. They don't have a legitimate pass rusher, and everybody says Dylan Moses being back just solves all their problems. But Christian Barmore was a guy that was a little bit beat up last year, and he kind of gets off. He gets out of his lane as far as assignments are concerned. I think he can be a playmaker. We don't know the injury status of LeBron Ray and what it's going to look like for him to be back. You're losing Diggs and McKinney on the back end, who are really good players, especially Xavier McKinney, a guy who lined up. He would blitz. He played man in the slot. When in nickel situations, he could come up and play the run. He's not going to be an easy guy. Anthony Jennings was a consummate pro setting the edge for that defense for multiple years. He's gone. Terrell Lewis is gone. Raekwon Davis is gone. I think people have just gotten accustomed to big-name defenders leave, big-name defenders enter, Nick Savage up, as I have to hear almost every day in Birmingham. And I wonder if that's still the case. Usually we've gotten a peek at those Nick Savages.
Right.
I remember seeing Jonathan Allen come in the game late against Tennessee and thinking, who in the hell is this guy? I remember seeing Raekwon Davis getting some late playing time thinking, whoa, look at this dude. Like, I remember Tim Williams getting pass rush situations late in games when he wasn't a regular starter saying, how's that guy not playing more? I haven't seen that from the next wave yet. So I don't know who the next guys are, and it's easy to just assume that they're going to be there. But also keep in mind, and this is where I think teams like Georgia, like Auburn with Ryan Russell, like LSU with Tommy Moffitt, like Florida with Nick Savage, that have had their strength coaches in place, their systems in place, the understanding, the expectation, the relationship has been there for a long time. Alabama doesn't have that. Alabama's new staff got 4 or 5 workouts in before these guys left. Now, I know they have Apple Watches and everybody's doing what they're supposed to do.
What do you think about that, Cole? Is that breaking the spirit of the rule of monitoring? Is that something that the SEC should say, you know what, go ahead, everybody do it. It's in the best interest of the player health.
As far as the monitoring part of it, Mike, I don't really care. Number one, the player doesn't have to wear it. Nobody's making him wear it. So if Alex Leatherwood wants to work out on his own and without an Apple Watch on, he can go do it. And if they don't want to start him, they don't have to start him. I think everybody's missing the boat on this thing. And maybe I'm crazy here, but how is the question not, oh, they just can go buy 75 dudes Apple Watches?
Right. That's right.
Like a $399 watch. Like, you can just do that? I mean, I don't know. Obviously, we all know it's after now. They're not going to get in trouble for it because they did it. But I would think that would be the question more than we're monitoring. And everybody says that, Jeff, just to the data, he's the head trainer at Alabama. Well, who does Jeff Allen report to?
Right.
Reports to Nick Saban. So, I don't, the monitoring thing, I don't care because they don't have to put them on. It's not like they're putting a microchip in their hip or something and they can.
That's coming. That's coming. Saban's working on that. He's working on that one right now. Cole, before I let you go, I'd be remiss if I did. You've been to all the SEC stadiums. I've been to most of them, but not in the tight window that you have. When I say to you, best stadium atmosphere in the SEC, what's your response? And you've been to them, and I know they can change from game to game, but just general feel. What stadium do you go into and go, this would be number one?
I've been in some cool ones, and every time people ask me, Mike, what's the loudest, what's the most intimidating, I tell you, it's all dependent.
Right.
Because I played in Knoxville, Tennessee in 1999. The year
I remember that game. The pick six. Remember the pick six early? Weren't there like 2 pick sixes or something crazy?
Deion Grant. We're not going to talk about that. I've never heard anything louder than that in my life. I've been to Columbia, South Carolina. I don't need it. I think Columbia, South Carolina is the most underrated venue in this conference. I'll tell you this: Kroger Field's come a long way, and that's a really fun place to go watch a game. I've been to Sanford Stadium a lot. It's one of the more entertaining, fun, cool atmospheres in the league. I think Brian Denny's completely overrated. Obviously, being a home guy at Auburn, I'm going to have a different feel for what that's all about. But I've had multiple guys tell me that's the most difficult place they've ever played. I've been to Gainesville when Tyrannosaurus Rex was on the verge of, looked like he was going to win the Heisman, and they won the SEC championship, and we got schooled down there. And that place, the student sections are literally 4 feet behind you. It's incredible. There is no place like Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. There just is not. I have been to overtime at night in that place. I've also been a part of running the fans out at halftime, 41-7 in 1999 cigar game. But there's that place is special. That place is different. That place is unique. There is a different feel when you walk inside that place. It's unlike anything else from a sporting perspective that I've ever been a part of. And it absolutely would have to be LSU.
Tips the cap to Tiger Stadium. I like Tiger Stadium as well. Not a great experience for Georgia there the last time they went. And unfortunately, with this SEC schedule, I think we're looking at 2029 before Georgia goes back. Cole, I make this case, and I understand this Jacksonville thing, and I probably shouldn't go here. But you know what? You've played in the Swamp. And I think that in having covered teams, I've covered Auburn in the Swamp. I've covered Alabama in the Swamp. I've not covered Georgia there. And I kind of feel like Georgia fans are missing, because to me, that is the most hostile crowd that I've seen, whether it was Tennessee or Auburn. I saw Terry Bowden go in there and beat them in '94 when they were supposed to be something. Now, you played for Terry. Your thoughts on the Swamp and playing on campuses versus some of these bye games at neutral sites, be it Jacksonville or now I guess Georgia playing Clemson in Charlotte, North Carolina?
But yeah, like I said, I went down there in 2000 with Rex Grossman and those guys, and I think it was 35-7 or something. They drummed us. I mean, it was ugly. When they're rolling, when they're good, it is as intimidating as any other place I've ever been. It's just not quite as big as Tiger Stadium. But like I said, you come over to the bench and the students are literally 4 feet behind you. They're calling you out by name in between every series and just telling you how terrible you are, with multiple expletives thrown in there as well. But that's part of what makes it fun. You forget for a moment that I have been a part of something similar in that I have played in Iron Bowls in 3 different venues. In Jordan-Hare Stadium, I played in the last Iron Bowl at Legion Field, and obviously played at Bryant-Denny Stadium, the first one there in over 100 years. Seeing Alabama and Auburn go back and forth between their home stadiums now, I don't think I would want it any other way. But it's hard for me because Legion Field, it means something special to me. The upper deck of Legion Field in Birmingham, Alabama used to say the football capital of the South. And for me, that's what it was. Because the SEC championship game, bowl games, high school state playoff games, Alabama versus Tennessee was there every year. That's where big boy college football was played. That's what that stadium meant to me. So to be able to play an Iron Bowl there, was pretty damn cool. And being able to see the fans split, even though it was 60-40, you get orange and blue in 40% of the stadium and crimson and white in 60% of the stadium. I mean, there's something special about that atmosphere. But the Alabama home game experience is amazing. The Auburn home game experience is amazing. Pretty much every school in this conference has an amazing home game experience. And I'm not just talking about going in and watching the game. I'm talking about arriving on campus. I remember the first Auburn game I went to, coming down the road and seeing those giant tiger paws in the street. My parents went to South Carolina. My aunt was a Hall of Fame basketball player at Clemson. I can remember as a little boy going to Carolina Clemson games in Clemson, South Carolina, and seeing those giant tiger paws on the street and just thinking it was the coolest thing that I had ever seen. The home game atmosphere for big-time college football, there's nothing like it. And I understand it means a lot to be played. And I've talked to Doring about this. Chris Doring played at all three venues. He played at all three places. Right. One of the very few Florida or Georgia players that has been able to do that. And, it's to have what that atmosphere could be taken away, I think is unfortunate for college football. Because I can imagine some of the great Florida teams against some of the great Florida teams in the swamp the last 20 years. I mean, some of those Mark Richt teams, some of those Kirby Smart teams that we've seen going down there to face off against either Dan Mullen or Steve Spurrier or Will Muschamp, whoever it was, some of those teams that competed in Sugar Bowls and SEC championship games. I mean, that could have been something really special. And I think we're sort of being robbed of that. And that's not taking away from what is in Jacksonville right now. I just think about what could be. And there's no way that you're going to convince me that what that is better than what could have been 10, 15 times in Gainesville, Florida.
Well, and I'll tell you, Cole, when it really resonated with me was when I saw what happened in Athens when Notre Dame came here. And, I mean, this town just blew up. And people said, oh, my gosh, wouldn't it be great? And I said, you know what? You could have this every other year with Florida. Yeah. It's the biggest game on Georgia's schedule. No offense to Tennessee, but right now it's not Tennessee. Tennessee may get back to being in that game, but they're not there right now. Certainly not Georgia Tech. The Auburn-Georgia rivalry is a little different. I want to ask you about that in a minute. But when that Notre Dame game come and I saw what Athens could be, the buzz, all the private planes. There were so many private planes, they couldn't even park them all at the airport. They had to drop people off and go elsewhere. You're flying Florida up here, let me tell you, those big gators, what do they call them, bull gators, boosters, that it would be unbelievable to have that home and home. Cole, my last question, because we're running out of time. As a former Auburn Tiger, and I know you don't speak for everybody, but how did you look at the different rivalries? I mean, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, I guess Auburn, Tennessee. There was a little remnant of that as you finished out your career. What were those rivalries like for Auburn, and how were they different from one another?
Well, they were both big. Auburn LSU. Well, that thing kind of took a life of its own right after I left, because that was when I think you had 5 or 6 in a row that were decided by the last possession. But it was a gigantic game when I was there. Auburn, Florida was a gigantic game because of what you kind of mentioned, where Terry went down to the swamp and had some success against some of those teams. But Auburn, Alabama is its own thing. I mean, it has its own life. It's its own organism. There is, in my opinion, Army-Navy is the only thing in sports that tops Auburn, Alabama. And that's sports. That's not college football. That's sports. It's Army-Navy, the Iron Bowl, and then we can start talking about Yankees, Red Sox, or whatever else you want to talk to. Packers, Bears, anything like that. Steelers, Ravens, whatever. So for me, that's what that game meant. That's what that game still is. The Auburn-Georgia game was a little bit different, though, because we had this little network of Georgia guys every year. And what that Iron Bowl meant to most of the fans and most of the guys on the team, that game meant that to them. So whether it was Takeo Spikes or Karsten Bailey or Antoine Nolan or Ben Lear, that was their Super Bowl. That was their Iron Bowl. That was their biggest game of the year. The only weird part about it, and Kirby has kind of changed this a little bit the last few years, is I felt like that was never reciprocated the other way. There were never any Alabama kids that played at Georgia, ever.
Right.
So it could never be as big because it never kind of went both ways. And now you see George Pickens over there and you see Clay Webb over there. So maybe it's starting to change a little bit, but it was a huge game. Geographically, I think the location is one of the few games that we bussed to. I had some family ties with some family members back to Georgia, so I kind of knew a little bit more about it and respected it and knew more, and it meant a little bit more to me based on the history of some of my family members. But it was just as heated and just as big. And I think I'll be interested to see this. With that game changing places on the calendar,
right?
Does it stay as big? Because it has been a make or break game for both teams. Last year, it was a game that could have made Auburn. 2 years ago, didn't help make Auburn. Now, you had to beat Alabama to do that as well. But, I mean, what happens if Aaron Murray scores a touchdown there? That's a little bit different for that Georgia football team. So, because of where it was in the calendar, I feel like it helped raise the bar of that rivalry. And it's not that it's still not going to mean anything. It's not that – I mean, you still got Vince Dooley. You still have Pat Dye. You still have the geographical location. You still have a lot of great games that have been played, whether it's the first overtime game, whether it's when Ben Leard set the school passing record down there in Athens in 1999, which to me is the greatest Auburn-Georgia game ever played. There are a lot of different games that have helped make that rivalry great, but I kind of wonder that if it's earlier, is it going to mean as much as often? Because how many times in the last, let's just say 10 years, have one or both of those teams been in the mix to go to Atlanta, which if you're in the mix to go to Atlanta, you're pretty much in the mix to go to the playoff for the BCS championship game. Right. So I just wonder if earlier in the year that might take away a little bit of just how dramatic that game has been the last 10, 15 years. Think about Georgia, South Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
That game's huge, and then it kind of goes away. And then it's huge, but then like last year it was huge, but then 3 weeks later it didn't mean anything. You're kind of like, wow, why did we think that was the game of the year? So I don't know. It'll be different in a different spot. I'm anxious to see it.
I think it's going to help Auburn, though, Cole, because now they get a little breathing room before that Alabama game. It was just a little too close. Guys get a little bit healthier. I know that it's still football, but I think it's really hard for guys to get up at that emotional high. I think it really helps Auburn.
Yeah, they're moving LSU back. So that's not helping Auburn.
They didn't get the trade-off, huh? Didn't work out for them like that. Well, rivalry's gone. Cole, thanks so much for your time. For the people watching, you can follow Cole on Twitter, @ColeCubelet. Cole, former Auburn player, a guy that's on Birmingham radio every day on WJOX. I enjoy doing the show, and I enjoy following you on the SEC Network, Cole. You've really brought a lot, and I certainly know as a beat guy, I enjoy talking to you about the line play. I know you're involved in the Joe Moore Offensive Line Award. I think you've really helped college football with the way you see the offensive line and promote these young linemen. I know they certainly appreciate you, and I really appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike. And sorry I was a little bit late. I had a 2-year-old and 4-year-old that didn't want to go to bed. So
figured that.
I had to get them down, so I apologize for that.
All good. Cole Cubelic, thanks a lot, Cole. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, so we're putting a wrap on it here tonight. This has been the Ingles on the Beat show. I'm Mike Griffith. Appreciate the production from Michael Carvel. I'm glad all you folks watching. Really enjoyed having Cole Cubelic on. A little bit different point of view from Cole. He is an expert. He has insight. He gets access to coaches and players that we simply don't get. And he's got a level of expertise that I think makes him one of the best sideline reporters in the business. There's a reason why he was hired to do the XFL games in the spring. And there's a reason why I follow him on Twitter. And there's a reason why I'll write a story about a lot of the things that Cole said tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope everybody has a great Tuesday night. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back on again Friday night with more Ingles on the Beat. And thanks again, Michael Carvel, for the production. Have a great Tuesday night, everybody.